Okay, so I was not planning on making another video on Highguard ever, let alone so soon after my last analysis on the game that I just put out, but literally one day, the next day after I put out my hour-long analysis breaking down all of the problems I have with the design of Highguard, link in the description if you want to go check that out, they finally started putting out story and lore cinematics about the game, which is just kind of so crazy to me because, like, for one, a huge criticism that I and many other creators have levied against Highguard is the fact that the game is so bad at explaining itself, right? Like I talked about, I compared it to Deadlock, which I must remind everybody is still in alpha. The game is nowhere near complete yet, and yet, despite that, it's able to convey so much lore and world building about its setting through just normal gameplay that not you don't even have to be like a Deadlock expert digging through like data mining and whatnot in order to like it's all very clear and evident and explained through character interactions and the map design and all of that good stuff. Meanwhile, Highguard utterly fails to convey really any amount of like world building through its characters and level design, which means that like even if these videos are great, I think that that is still a big criticism worth pointing out. But of course, it's also just like insane to me that now of all times is when they finally start to explain the lore of their game. Like they announced the game like over a month ago in December with the Game Awards. And I understand that like that's apparently not entirely on them and like Jeff wanted to show it off and like they did, like I don't know the full details like if they were planning on being announced at least at the Game Awards, but they didn't plan on being the final announcement, but they were still going to like be there, or if the game like got delayed because I know they wanted to shadow drop it. But the long and short of it is that regardless of what led up to it, the game was announced back in December, and then they just went radio silent with zero trailers or anything to try and build up hype until the launch day, where they tried to, I guess, eat their cake and have it too, and just pretend that the game was shadow dropping, even though it was announced over a month earlier, which is just mind boggling to me. But, like, even then they still didn't drop the lore trailers because like I waited like over a week before I put out my analysis. So like I thought for sure if they were going to put out like lore or something that they would have done it by now, but instead they wait like a week and a half after launch before they finally start. Like, what is this marketing strategy? It makes zero sense to me. Like, this would have been the perfect kind of material to put out during that month-long gap where everybody was super confused about what Highguard even was. Like you don't have to like put out a ton of gameplay trailers. Like at the very least just put out the lore stuff so that people can like have something to chew on and like go, oh, I understand like about the lore and the world building and whatnot now I can like get excited for the game. The fact that they went radio silent while they were apparently sitting on at least a couple of these videos, which I have to imagine like they didn't just pump these out all of a sudden after the game came out. Like these had to have been in production for a while, I imagine. So I just don't understand why they waited until now to release them. But okay, whatever. Regardless of how strange their marketing strategy has been up to this point, what about the actual quality of the trailers themselves? Are they at least, good on their own merits? Do they finally explain some of the world building that I've had so many questions about up to this point? I mean, look, I am a game design focused creator, Like, I feel much more qualified to talk about, like, mechanics and game balancing and the process of, like, programming in these new systems. And, I'm not really as qualified to talk about, like, narrative and exposition, but I don't know, man. These just don't do it for me. Like, okay, to give it credit, the intro to the first episode does finally start to explain a few of the big questions that I've had about this setting. It appears that what Highguard is, which is such a basic fundamental question that is not really explained at all in-game. Highguard is apparently the continent that we are fighting on, and the lore, the backstory, is that it just kind of appeared out of nowhere one day. It's kind of like if the lost city of Atlantis just suddenly rose out of the ocean, out of the middle of the Atlantic one day. Like there was just an ocean of water, and then suddenly an entire continent appeared. And then so naturally people went to investigate, and of course, why is everybody fighting over Highguard? Because it has generic, nebulous, valuable resources, which is like, come on, man, that's like the most generic ass, boring reason that they could have come up with for why people are fighting over it. Like, you couldn't be more specific than just valuable resources and treasure. Like, is there not like it's implied that this is like a place of like ancient magic, which like again also like I am sort of inferring here, but I guess it seems like the setting was more tech focused like normally, which I guess would explain why there's like sci-fi generators and bombs and guns and whatnot, and that I assume Highguard is like ancient magical land where there's much more spell casting and whatnot, and so I guess that's the justification for the mix of magic and technology, but the way that they sort of describe it, it seems like magic still existed outside of Highguard. It's just that Highguard has more magic, I guess. Again, a lot of this I have to speculate because they're still not really clear on it at all, and I really feel like they could be doing a better job explaining their world building and delivering this exposition in a more interesting and informative way. But regardless, after they get through this intro, which kind of sort of finally answers like a couple of super basic fundamental questions about this game's setting, they then go through a portal after gearing up with a couple of the other mercenaries, and then they just kind of go through a cinematic version of a completely normal match of Highguard. Like, literally the entire rest of the trailer is just playing Highguard, but it's a pre-rendered cutscene instead of gameplay footage. Like, it literally starts with Atticus going for the shield breaker, and then they take the shield breaker to one of the bases and break the shield, and then they start a raid, and they plant a bomb, they defend the bomb, and the bomb goes off, they blow up the base, and that's it. Like, it completely fails to really explain why any of the things that actually happen in a match are happening. Like, I was kind of hoping to get answers for, like, why does the shield breaker exist? Like, why is it, like, why is this random ass magic sword appearing in the middle of maps out of nowhere for seemingly no reason? And then why does stabbing this sword like into the base of an enemy shield, which, like, if that's how you activate the shield breaker, why does the shield have like things to stab the shield breaker into it? Like, is that a necessary component? But like, regardless, why does this sword then summon the giant siege? Like, none of the questions that I had about why anything in the game is happening are really answered in this trailer. Like, they answered a couple of backstory questions, but not anything about, like, why anything in the game is happening. Like, I still don't understand why, like, who set up the bases? Like, did the wardens set up the bases? Are the bases already there? Like, who built the shields? Why are they designed this way? Why does the shield breaker summon a thing that, like, it still doesn't really explain anything of value, which is just, it's so frustrating because it feels like there are answers, or at least that there should be answers, but they're just not giving us any. And the second episode isn't really much better in this regard. It is a little bit more cinematic, like it's less of just replicating what a normal Highguard match is in a cinematic format, but at the same time, it is also very clearly just a trailer to show off the new character that they'll be releasing soon, as well as the new map that will be releasing alongside them. So, like, this trailer doesn't really explain anything either. At best, we just kind of learn that there's this MacGuffin that Atticus uses to reveal the new map, and that's kind of it. Everything else is mostly about showing off the new features that will be added to the game shortly after the trailer was dropped. So it doesn't really add anything to it. And in fact, it actually kind of confuses things a bit, because in the first trailer we saw Atticus teaming up with two other characters, one of which was this guy Redmayne, who then in this trailer is now suddenly going against him. And it's like, in the first trailer, like, Atticus had this like big heroic moment where he saw that, like, oh, his teammates are both down and dying and he's got to try and save them all, so he basically pops his ultimate and saves the day and then rescues the other two people. And then now in this trailer, in this video, suddenly Redmayne is just fighting him, and Atticus is fighting him back. And I guess there was, like, I thought there was like a character relation, like maybe there's a backstory there, that they fight together, that they have some kind of honor with each other or something. But no, I guess they were just paid to work together, and now they're just mercenaries being paid to fight each other. And it's like, I guess I understand that now. Like, I guess that is technically exposition that has been delivered, but it's one of those things where it's like, why did they write their story this way? Because it just means that now they can't really have interpersonal relationships between the characters, because apparently all of these characters are just random mercenaries that don't care about who they're fighting alongside or against, and will just fight whoever they're paid to fight no matter what. So, like, it seems like they're setting up some kind of relationship between the new character and Atticus based on this video. But for all I know, maybe the next trailer will show them fighting each other again, just like they showed Redmayne fighting Atticus, despite them working together in the previous one. So like, they've created a scenario where the characters just aren't interesting. Like, compare this to the first ever trailer that was put out for Overwatch. Like, it's actually structured kind of similarly to what Highguard did, where it starts out with a bit of exposition talking about the history of this world, where we learn that the world apparently went through some kind of global conflict, and Overwatch rose up as effectively a team of superheroes that restored peace and order to the globe. And we also learn just as quickly that they have since been disbanded, but they clearly are still held in high regard, since we zoom out to a museum heralding a lot of the good that Overwatch did in the past. But of course, then we get introduced to two of the Overwatch characters who literally come crashing in through the ceiling, fighting a couple of other characters. And they immediately show, like, oh, literally the first thing Winston does is protect a couple of kids from Widowmaker. So right off the bat, we establish that Winston and his allies are the good guys, and Widowmaker and her allies are the bad guys. And, like, this sounds incredibly simple and obvious, but it's already more than what Highguard is doing. Like, yes, we show people fighting each other in Highguard, and we're following it from the perspective of Atticus, so I guess we can assume he's the good guy because he's who we're following. But the game doesn't really establish that very well, does it? Like sure, the fire guy has a smug grin on his face that makes him seem like an asshole, but, like, is he actually, like, a bad guy? Like, what makes him a bad guy? What makes Atticus a good guy? He saves his allies, sure, but his allies are just fighting alongside him. Like, a bad guy could want to save their allies too and still be a bad guy. Like, they don't really establish if any of these characters are meant to be, like, good or evil. Like, even something that basic is not conveyed in Highguard's cinematic. And furthermore, we learn so much more about each of the characters' personalities in the Overwatch trailer than we do in the Highguard one. Like I said, literally the first thing that Winston does is get in the way to take bullets to save children, which clearly showcases not only, like, his gameplay role as a tank, but he's also very clearly very soft-spoken and kind, despite his large, hulking gorilla nature. And Tracer is shown to be very cocky and playful, despite this this being a literal firefight, and then later on Reaper is shown just kind of being an asshole for no reason as he destroys Winston's glasses, which makes him look really petty, and which is kind of funny, but like it tells us about like who these characters are as people and what their personalities are and how they play off of each other, which is, again, it's really basic, but it's so much more than anything we get from these Highguard trailers. It's just that, overall, like, these trailers, they fail to really meaningfully justify why anything in the game is the way that it is. Like, they finally give us a little bit of backstory and whatnot, I guess, but in terms of explaining what's actually going on in like a normal game of Highguard, the best we get is that I guess we're fighting over nebulous valuable resources on the behalf of whoever is hiring these mercenaries to fight each other, and that's kind of it. They still don't explain things like why there's a magic sword that gets summoned out of nowhere that in turn summons a giant siege engine that breaks down these sci-fi shields and all that jazz. And it's like, the longer they go without explaining like the lore behind these mechanics that clearly feel like they should have lore behind them, the more it feels like they just exist because it looks cool and that there is no lore behind them. And I'm not saying that you can't do some things in your game just because it's cool, but like, if you're gonna have a game with a setting like this that is very clearly meant to have some kind of ongoing narrative with evolving characters and some semblance of a storyline behind it, I feel like you should try to tie in your gameplay at least somewhat into that story and vice versa. Again, like I've said before in my longer video, Overwatch does such a good job of making each map feel like it's telling its own story. Like, you can understand why the characters are fighting in that map just by looking at the design of the map itself. Especially the payload maps are really good at this, because each payload, instead of being just some generic thing that you're pushing to an objective, every single map has their own unique payload that is flavored to why the characters are fighting on that map. You don't need to look up a lore video to understand why the characters are fighting. It's all self-evident through the level design in the game itself, and it's very obvious to anyone who plays it, whereas Highguard lacks that fundamental understanding because none of its level design conveys any amount of story at all. Also, just as a quick aside, something that I just realized is that even in their cinematic portrayal of a typical Highguard match that they do in episode 1, isn't it kind of funny how the start of the match that they show you takes place already at the shield breaker, and they just so happen to conveniently skip over the 4 minutes of boring reinforcements and looting that actually happens at the start of every single game? Huh. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like those two phases of the game are super boring, and there's no real way to portray them in an interesting way in a cinematic trailer. Huh. Isn't that fascinating? But, as always, I'm happy to continue the conversation in the comments down below. It feels like these trailers only keep reinforcing this idea that Highguard is just this random hodgepodge of cool-sounding ideas from the last few years that still fundamentally lacks that core cohesion to me, and these trailers don't do anything to kind of address that or fix that, and if anything, just kind of reinforce that interpretation of this game. But feel free to let me know what you think about these trailers and whether they actually do anything to improve upon the, I guess, story of Highguard now up to this point. And as always, if you like the video, make sure to leave me a like and make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this in the future. I promise that this is going to be my last Highguard video probably ever, unless there's another sudden development that happens the day after this video goes live, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Also, there is a link to my Ko-Fi in the description if you want to help support the channel more directly. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.